You know, I've been thinking a lot today about the idea of disruption, about the idea of disruption when it comes to business models. Whether you're an accountant or you're an architect or you're an attorney, what happens when business models are disrupted? Good afternoon if you're watching this live or later on LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitch. I've been talking all last week and all this week. I've decided to start this series of LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitch live streams where I pick a theme every day and we dig into different aspects, different facets of that theme. Last week, I talked about emotional intelligence. This week, I'm going to talk about bringing humanity or keeping humanity or figuring out how to stay connected as human beings in the face of technology and everything that's going on. And I want to make sure that everybody understands before we even get started with this conversation that I'm not an expert. I am here simply to facilitate a conversation. So if you're seeing this live or if you're even watching this later, I welcome your comments. If you're an expert on any of the things that I'm talking about now, I welcome you to weigh in on the topic. If you have questions, comments, concerns about the topic, ask them, bring them up. That's what conversations are all about. And I do want these live streams to become conversations. My name is Jeff Eccles. I'm the president and I'm the CSO of Echo Engagement. I'm also the director of brand strategy at EntreArchitect. You may have seen me before. If you're in the architecture world, you've probably seen me before, maybe on a stage somewhere, or maybe as part of Context and Clarity, which is a live stream that I do every weekday afternoon, or it's a podcast that comes out every morning, or a Clubhouse conversation that I host every weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And last week when I was talking about emotional intelligence, that was the theme for last week, emotional intelligence. It struck me that emotional intelligence is not just a topic for architects. That's really the audience for EntreArchitect, as you can imagine. But emotional intelligence really speaks to all of us, first of all, but definitely to my entire network, which is really professional services. So whether you're an architect, an engineer, or a contractor, a real estate professional, a creative or a design professional, an attorney, a doctor, an accountant, emotional intelligence is important for all of us. And so this week, as I'm continuing with a new theme, but continuing these conversations and talking about humanity and human touch and somehow continuing to bring, maybe even bringing more humanity to our work, to our lives, to our jobs, to our businesses, even as technology advances, even as technology expands, even as things move faster and faster, further forward in terms of technology, the question becomes, and of course, it's an extension of last week's conversation about emotional intelligence. How do we keep the humanity in a technological world? And so, like I said, the theme for the week is humanity in the face of, and every day I'll have a different topic. And the topic I thought that maybe we could start with this week is, now that there are some businesses that are going to be headed back to the office, maybe rushing back to the office, maybe some businesses that are really wanting to get their employees back to their desks after 12 months of being away. There are some employees that really want to get back to their desk, while at the same time, there are businesses that will now remain remote maybe forever or have some sort of hybrid model from here on out. They've started to realize some things. Hey, we could do things differently than we used to. But I think that the reason that a lot of people are wanting to go back and a lot of businesses are wanting to go back is, number one, fear. Right? We have to understand what's going on. We have to have our finger on the pulse. I need to know what my employees are doing. I'm afraid that we're losing touch with our employees, maybe losing touch with our customers, our clients, our patients. But I think the other is the fear of not being together, of not being able to communicate in the same way, of not being able to communicate and connect on the same level. And so that's what I think is interesting about this idea of humanity in the face of a remote or a hybrid workplace. So, one question is, how do we bring 2019 connectiveness? How do we bring 2019 human connections into the future, into remote and into hybrid workplace models? So that's what I thought we could talk about today. And if you have any thoughts on that, please weigh in the comments. Even if you're watching this in the replay version at some point down the line, use the hashtag replay and let me know what your thoughts are. If you're an expert on this, weigh in live now or in the replay version. And if you're joining this conversation, it's been pushed out for about 7 minutes now. So maybe some of you are actually starting to see this in your feed. If you're watching this live right now, or even in the replay later, say hi. Say, hey, Jeff, I'm here. Let me know that you're here and let me know where you're joining the conversation from. Again, my name is Jeff Eccles. We're somehow connected, especially if we're on LinkedIn. You're probably part of my network. Maybe if you're catching this on YouTube, you subscribe to my channel, or if you're on Twitch, maybe you subscribe or this popped up in your feed somehow. But like I said at the beginning, I'm the president and CSO of Echo Engagement. I help professional services firms move away from people that are looking for order takers, moving away from those tire kickers and towards people that value experts and expertise and people that are in search of trusted advisors. And so you can find more about that at echoengage.com, as you see right there on the screen. Early at the very beginning of this conversation, at the very beginning of the stream, I mentioned disruption. I've been thinking a lot about disruption today. And I mentioned that I host this show. It comes in many forms. It comes in a live stream every weekday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern. It comes in the form of a short form podcast that comes out every morning. It comes in the form of a coffee talk on the Clubhouse app every morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. It's called Context and Clarity. And so I have these themes. This week, the theme is humanity in the face of technology and changes. Last week, it was emotional intelligence. The week before that, it was about company or firm culture. The week before that, it was about your value mindset. And one of the things that struck me as I was thinking about all of these themes that I talk about week in and week out, and also on my podcast, it's called the Build Your Brand podcast. One of the things that I realized this morning when I'm talking on Build Your Brand, or when I'm talking on Context and Clarity, when we're exploring these themes, is that every single one of these themes that we talk about, and I keep saying we, because these really are conversations. If you ever join one of the Context and Clarity conversations, they are true conversations. Yes, it's me on the screen, but I'm taking live comments, and on a daily basis, we may have 200 or more comments in that conversation. There is this back and forth. There is this conversation that's going on. So I do mean we in a real sense, and conversation in a real sense. When we're having these conversations about humanity, about emotional experience, about culture, about your value mindset, these are things that we all need. We all need, if we want to have successful businesses, we all need these things. But I also understand when we're talking about remote and hybrid workplaces going forward forever, when we're talking about emotional intelligence as a leader, emotional intelligence for our person, for our relationships, empathy for our ideal clients, even the term ideal client, when we're talking about culture over the course of 12 months of crisis, culture of going back to the office, perhaps culture of being in a remote or hybrid workplace. When I'm talking about all of these things, they are disruptive as much as they're needed, as much as they ought to be natural, as much as they ought to be a natural and big part of our businesses as professional services leaders. Again, I know that my audience is predominantly professional services folks. So that's, if you're not in professional services, that's okay too, because all of these things are applicable to you and what you do. But if you are an attorney, an accountant, an architect, an engineer, a construction professional, a creative or design professional, a doctor, anything in professional services, real estate professional, how important are these things that I'm talking about? But at the same time, how unusual are they? One of the things that struck me is that the reason that these conversations on the Context and Clarity platform attract such an audience, attract such a conversation, such a passionate conversation, such an engaged conversation. It's not me, right? I'm just here to facilitate the conversation. People aren't coming to and engaging in these conversations because of me. Sure, I facilitate it, but they're coming here because they're needed conversations. They're coming to these conversations because they have something to share. They have an experience to share. They have questions. They have longings. They have a desire to figure some of these things out. And so I realized that as much as these ought to be a natural part of what we all do, and as much as our businesses would be better, our businesses would be more powerful, we'd be much better at our work, at our craft, at what we do, at the way that we serve. As much as all of these things are true, these conversations are this powerful or this engaged because they're a little bit uncommon. And so the more I thought about this today, the more I realized that really some of these things, in a way, are disruptive when it comes to the idea of the traditional practice. So here's one thing I want you to think about, and I'm going to wrap this up pretty quickly because, I've committed somewhere between 15 and a half an hour to these conversations every day. But I want to throw this question out there. If you're in professional services somewhere, again, you may be a real estate agent, you may be an attorney, you may be an engineer or an architect or an accountant, something in creative or design services. One thing I want you to really think about and ask yourself is, in your profession, wherever it is, in any of those things that I've named or beyond, in your profession, is there a traditional business model? Is there a traditional way of doing business? Think about that for a minute. Think about what you do, right? And how you do it. And maybe if you're out on your own right now, think about the last firm or company business that you worked for. Maybe if you've been around for a while, 2 or 3 of those that you've worked for over the course of your career. And think about this. How different is your business, your firm, your company from the last one that you worked for? And that last one that you worked for, how different was it from the one before that you worked for, and the one before that you worked for? Is there a traditional business model in your profession? If there is, how many years has it been around? How many years has the traditional business model in your profession been operating in pretty much the same way? How many years has everybody in your profession been doing, this is the way we do it, this is the way we've always done it? How long have people been saying that, right? How long has that been going on? And for some of your professions, I know, because again, many of my clients, many of the people that I work with, many of the people that I speak to are in traditional practice models that have been practiced this way since the 50s or the 40s. What's the math on that? If it's been since the 40s, if we take 1940 as just simple math here, then that means 80 years. I think I did the math right there. If there is a traditional business model, a traditional practice model in your profession, and it's been going on for 80 or 70 or 60 or 50 years, let me ask you this. What has changed around you in the last 50, 60, 70, 80 years? What has changed around your profession in the last 50, 60, 70, 80 years? Is it time? Is your traditional profession, um, professional business model, is it ripe for disruption? Is it time for it to be disrupted? And I don't mean in a way that brings the whole house of cards crashing down, right? I'm talking about disrupting it and changing it for the better, disrupting it and changing it so that you can serve your customers, your clients, your patients better. I'm talking about disrupting it so that you can make a better living, so that you can be more profitable, so that you have better, more humane workplaces. I know in some of your professions, your workplaces, the culture of your workplaces, the work hours, the atmosphere, the attitudes, the cultures are severely suffering. I know in many of your workplaces that as many as 30 or more percent of young women, young and middle-aged women, drop out of your profession because it's just not friendly to the reality of a young woman as she ages, as she starts a family, as she has other needs and responsibilities. On the flip side, it's also not a great situation for many young men who maybe get married, who maybe have families, who maybe have other family and other types of responsibilities. Is your profession, is the traditional business model in your profession ripe to be disrupted for any number of reasons? For profitability, for processes, for culture, for any of these things? Right? Remember, I've talked over the past several weeks about your value mindset, what mindset you bring to your clients, or what value you bring to your clients. I've talked about culture, the culture of your business, the culture of your firm. I've talked about emotional intelligence. And this week, I'm talking about being human, bringing humanity, making sure that we keep humanity in the face of all the technological changes that are going on. So as I hosted the Clubhouse conversation this morning on the topic of being human in a remote or hybrid business model world, it's a really interesting conversation, right? A lot of people in Clubhouse talked about how they actually think it's better in a hybrid model, right? We're going to have to rethink some policies, some procedures, some things like that. But what about flex hours for family people, right? Moms, dads, people that need to care for parents, people that need to essentially homeschool their kids in a way. And I'm not saying that to take away from teachers in any way, but the kids need help, right? When they're schooling from home. A lot of people talked about uh, the true benefits of the hybrid and remote models. And so I think that's a great thing, right? Humanity in the fact that these models allow us to be better human beings, allow us to be better spouses, better parents, better caregivers, whatever that context is, whatever that situation for the employee is. So that was one of the things that came up, and I really appreciated that part of the conversation. Another thing that came up, and this was from a firm owner, he said that he thinks that the baseline that needs to be drawn, right? The foundation that needs to be built is to assume that we're always going to have to go back to a completely remote scenario. Because if we make that assumption and we build from there, and that means hardware, and it means software, and it means policies and procedures, and it means trust and all of these things. But if we build a foundation based on that, then we have more flexibility going forward, certainly, but then we're never really in crisis mode again if we have to go back to fully remote. So I love that idea of rebuilding with that as the baseline. So I really appreciated that part of the conversation as well. And then another part of the conversation, which can't be overlooked, I don't think at all, shouldn't be, and I used the word just a minute ago. Someone brought up the idea of trust, right? We talked about paid time off. Do you have 25 days or do you have unlimited discretionary paid time off, right? And the people that weighed in on that, without exception, said that as they've seen that, as they've experienced that, as they've implemented it, the unlimited paid time off has always been a better situation for the employee, for the company, for the managers, for the leaders. That might amaze some of you. You know, what would happen right now? We allow our employees to accrue X number of hours per week and up to a certain number of hours of paid time off per year. What would happen if you said, you know what, forget about that policy? Instead, we're going to have unlimited discretionary paid time off. So you don't have to worry about losing your job or losing your livelihood if you have to take some time off to pay for or to care for a parent that's sick or a child that's sick or something like that. Now, it was some of the stories I thought were amazing, and I really appreciated. Sorry, I got a call coming in. I really appreciated everybody sharing in those scenarios, but I think the one thing that was really that we really can't overlook is that idea of trust. None of that can work, right? The employee has to trust the employer. The employer has to trust the employee. And so that means we're setting standards and we're living up to standards on both sides of that equation. And so those to me were some of the probably the three biggest takeaways today in this conversation about being human in a hybrid world or a human hybrid model or something like that. Again, if you come across this recording later and you happen to watch this recording later, wherever you are, Twitch or YouTube or LinkedIn, and you have some thoughts on that, please drop it into the comments because I do want to build up some momentum here. I do want to build these live streams into real conversations. I've done it. I know it takes a lot, right? I've been doing Context and Clarity as a live stream since April 6th of 2020. So I don't know what the math is. That's a lot of episodes. And yes, we've built quite a community. We've got a lot of momentum there. And I know this is a separate effort right here, but I do want to build this into something that becomes a conversation because I do think that number one, it's sort of a shame that these ideas of humanity and emotional intelligence and culture and value mindset, it's kind of a shame that those are somewhat disruptive ideas. But that also tells me that we have situations that are ripe for and actually need to be disrupted. So if you'd like to join this conversation at any point this week, the theme all week will be humanity in the face of technology. Today, like I said, I'm talking about human in the model of a hybrid or remote model, meaning long-term, not just 8 weeks, not just until we can get back in the office. How do we bring more human connection? How do we bring more humanity? What's required for that? For long-term hybrid models, long-term remote models. That's the theme or the topic for today. Tomorrow, the title is The Right Fit. I know that many companies, many firms, many businesses are really busy right now and getting a lot of inquiries right now. A lot of people reaching out for help. And I know that because of that, there are many that are overwhelmed. My gosh, how do I respond to all of these inquiries? What do I do? Do I need to respond to all of those? And I was actually seeing this as a post about a week ago. Somebody said that I'm busy. I've got a lot of inquiries coming in. I'm overwhelmed because I'm not sure how many of these I actually need to respond to, how quickly I should respond to them. Overwhelm and stress around that. And a lot of people that responded to that post said, hey, you need to respond within 24 to 48 hours. And then other people said, well, don't worry, but you can automate some of those things. You can put tools into place that can help you maybe qualify some of these leads, can help you respond, can help you schedule some of these things. And, honestly, all of that is really good advice. But my question is, how do we balance those things? And that's what we'll talk about tomorrow. How do we balance those things? Because your clients, if you're in professional services, and again, I know that's the majority of my network is professional services. So if you are an accountant or an attorney or a doctor or a creative or design professional or an architect or an engineer or a real estate professional, construction professional, any of those, that the clients, the customers, the patients that come to you are coming to you looking for the right fit. Right. There are a lot of doctors out there. How do I find the doctor that feels like the right fit for me? There's a lot of attorneys out there that do what you do. How do I find the attorney that feels like the right fit for me? So there are a lot of clients, customers, patients coming to you looking for the right fit. And so how do you create that feeling of the right fit? We'll talk about that tomorrow. How do you create that feeling at the same time attempting to not become overwhelmed, attempting to push some of these things off so you're not stressed, which means maybe automation or scheduling or things like that. So how do you balance those things? Because they're looking for the right fit, not to buy healthcare via Amazon or not to buy a law settlement, a court judgment via Amazon.com or something like that. So that's my question. That's the topic for tomorrow. That kind of humanity in the face of that kind of technology. So we're talking about the right fit tomorrow. So again, I will be back here again tomorrow as close to 2 p.m. Eastern as I can. Again, my name is Jeff Eccles. I'm president and CSO of Echo Engagement. I'm also the director of brand strategy at Entre Architect, the host of the Build Your Brand podcast, the host of the Context and Clarity podcast, and also the host of the Context and Clarity live stream that happens every weekday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern inside the Entre Architect Community Facebook group. On Thursdays, Catherine McPhail is my co-host, and we simulcast that show, that 4 p.m. Eastern show. We have a special guest every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern, and we broadcast that to Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch. This week, our special guest will be Brian Kramer, who's the author of It's Not B2B or B2C, It's H2H, and also Shareology. He's a TED speaker, a great keynote speaker, and he'll be our guest to talk about being human in a technology world. So I'll be back here again tomorrow to continue this conversation about humanity, human connection, human touch, even in the face of technology and everything that we have at our disposal. So I invite all of you into this conversation. If you're an expert on any of these things, weigh in. If you have questions or comments, weigh in. Put them in the comments wherever you are. I'll appreciate you. I'll appreciate that. And I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching if you're doing this in the future. And I'll see you again soon. Let's be human. Let's connect as human beings.